Okay, we're 2 minutes past now, so there should still be a few more people jumping on to join us, but I will get started. Welcome to week 5. We're already not quite halfway, but we're getting pretty close to being halfway through the course now. The lecture tonight is going to be a little bit different to the previous week, but I'm not going to be talking at you the whole time, giving you heaps of information. This one will be structured a little bit more similar to some of the practicals that we've had, really focused on this final report and allowing you a lot of time to get started on this report. And I'll go through the instructions again and answer any questions that you have as well. But just before I get started on all of that, as always, I like to just do a little reminder of where we're up to and what's going on. So like I said, we're in week 5. Tomorrow night's practical will be hybrid, so can definitely come and join me in person for those of you who want to. And we still obviously will have the Zoom option as well. As of next week, so week 6, it's the expectation that for students who are in Adelaide, that they are attending both the lecture and practical in person. So as of next week, Wednesday night's lecture will also be in person on campus as well. We do obviously still have the Zoom option. I know that lots of students aren't near Adelaide and can't get here, and also have that option as well, because I do understand that in particular, if people are feeling unwell and things like that, we obviously don't want you coming in as well. So we still definitely do have the Zoom option. The reminder for this week in terms of, sorry, that should not say, that should say the 25th, because it's the 25th on Friday. The third practical checkpoint is due this Friday. So I can see a question has come in the chat as well around what's due this week in terms of the quiz. So the quiz is due next week in week 6, but the practical checkpoint is due this Friday. So we will be focusing on that practical checkpoint in tomorrow's practical. So don't worry if you haven't started looking at it yet. That's what tomorrow's practical is going to be dedicated to. But just a reminder that we do have that practical due on Friday. So before we sort of get started on some of the activities you'll be doing and working on the report itself, I know that I went over the report a little bit last week, but I do want to go over it again this week, just so we're all on the same page in terms of what we are doing for that report. So I'm just going to stop sharing for a second so I can bring up the right screen, and then I will share it again. So yeah, so just a reminder in terms of the assessment. So like I said, we're in week 5, which means we've got a practical checkpoint due this week. And then next week in week 6, we have both a quiz and a practical checkpoint due. So that's one of those multiple choice quizzes. So one of the ones that you do in your own time, or you might get time in class next week to do it as well. It's not one of the tests that we did in class like we did last week. So just again, so all on the same page, this week we've got a practical checkpoint due. Next week you have another practical checkpoint, one of the multiple choice quizzes, and you actually also have the first draft of this report, which is why I'm going over the report again in lots of detail today and giving you plenty of time to get started on it in class today, because next week obviously quite busy with the practical and the quiz as well. So in terms of all of the information that you need to know about the assessment, so all under the assessment tab as always, but the individual report is really, all of that information is at the bottom of this section. So these different submission points are the points to submit your draft. So we do have 3 drafts for this assessment. The first one's due in week 6, like I said, so next week. So you submit those just as if you are submitting an assessment, but you're not being graded on those drafts. So I'll definitely be giving you feedback, but you won't be getting marks as such. However, if you don't submit the draft, you will marks will be taken from your final report. So hope that makes sense, but you're not going to get like a letter grade or a score out of 100, for example, for the draft, but they do have to be submitted. And then you have your final report that needs to be submitted, not until week 11. So we have plenty of time to work on that final report, and you've got plenty of support both in class and also with the draft as well. So in terms of what you need to know about the report, everything that you need to know is in this report examples and resources. So in particular, the report information is the important document, as this is the document that has all of the information that you need to know about the report. So it's worth 40% of your overall grade. So it's worth quite a bit of your overall grade, which is why it's really important that we ensure that you are taking the time and doing all of the drafts and getting all of the supports needed so that you can hopefully get the best grade possible for this one. So you, like I said, some of this will be a little bit repetitive from what I said last week, but I just want to make it really clear before we actually get started on it. So this report is all about disruptive technologies. So disruptive technologies is about new technologies that change the way that we do things. So there is a whole huge list of disruptive technologies. Some that we have spoken about in our lectures already are things like automatic driving cars, so cars that drive themselves, for example. A smartphone was a disruptive technology when it first came out. Apple Watches and things like that were definitely disruptive technologies. AI is a disruptive technology. Blockchain and some of the cryptocurrencies. So there's a whole variety of them, but they are basically just a technology that changes the way that we do things currently. So you will be required to research a range of these disruptive technologies, but really importantly, thinking about technologies that are relevant to your future chosen career. You don't have to be super specific with your chosen career yet. Some of you might know exactly what you want to do, and you might want to say, this is the exact role I want to do, and you're going to focus on that, and that is absolutely great. Or some of the examples here are obviously a bit more broad. So for example, maybe you know that you want to work in a health field, but you don't know exactly what role you want yet. So you could just say you want to work in a health field. Or maybe you know you want to work in an engineering area, but you don't know what type of engineer you want to be yet. So there's no right or wrong there. Totally fine to be really specific if you want to be, but you can also be more broad and vague if you want to be as well. But it is important that the technologies are relevant to your future career choices. So like I said this week, this does mean that everyone is going to have lots of different disruptive technologies because everyone's going to have slightly different careers that they probably want to do. And later tonight, I am going to put you into breakout rooms to have a discussion amongst yourselves about what some of the disruptive technologies that you're thinking about doing together as a way of sort of getting some feedback from each other. And it is also totally okay to do the same disruptive technology as somebody else as well. So also don't be concerned if you say, oh, I'm doing this disruptive technology, but somebody else in my group also said they're doing that. That is fine. As long as you don't copy the information from each other, totally fine to have the same. And some of you definitely will have the same. So an example is blockchain technology could be useful in business environments such as manufacturing, where it could provide useful information about the movement of goods along a supply chain. So other things could be definitely with AI technologies. There's lots of uses for that in all different types of careers. In the psychology area, we're definitely using AI for children with disabilities, for example, as a way to sort of get them involved in some different activities in a space that they feel comfortable with. So there's heaps of different examples. So you need to choose 3 disruptive technologies, and they do need to be 3 different types of technologies. The information that you are going to include needs to come from reputable websites or from peer-reviewed journals. So meaning that you can't use Wikipedia or blogs, but you could use organizational websites, you could use government websites, and then also you could use textbooks as well, or you could also use peer-reviewed journal articles that you might find on Google Scholar. So in terms of the report itself, it is quite a bit bigger than all different, I guess, than everything else that we're doing in this course in terms of the assessment. Some important things before I get into the structure though, this does have to be written in your own words. So at the end of class today, I'm going to talk a bit more about referencing, but it is really important that you are using your own words for this assessment. So you do have to be, if you read a website that has a really good description of your disruptive technologies, you need to put that information into your own words. You can't just copy and paste that. So copy and pasting will result in academic integrity flags because it will come up and turn it in that is copied. So any information that you read needs to be referenced in text. Again, I will get into a bit more about the nitty-gritty of referencing at the end of today. And use of quotes should be no more than 5% of your word count. So if you do want to use a direct quote because you think that there's a really good definition that you could not put into your own words, you can use quotes really sparingly. So 5% is only probably 3 to 4 sentences, absolute maximum should be direct quotes. Everything else should be paraphrased. Also, you don't have to use quotes. Totally, I'm not going to deduct marks if you don't use quotes. In actual fact, the fewer quotes, the better. But if there are some really specific quotes that you want to put in, that's okay as well. So in terms of the report, so a question did just come in on the chat about word count as well. Really good question. So 2,250 words is your word count. That doesn't include the cover page or the table of contents, the table of figures, or the reference list. So none of that sort of start and end of the report, but so 2,250 words. It's quite a big word count for this.
How about the first draft?
What was that, sorry?
Because they have many drafts, so how about first draft? So
so the word count for the draft, you mean?
Yes.
So I'm not going to check word count in the draft. So there's nothing in particular that you have to be under. I will show you in a minute that under the different submissions, it says sort of what stage your draft should be at. So I'll go through that in a moment, which will give you an idea, but I'm not going to actually check. What I would say is the more words that you put in a draft means the more feedback that I'll be able to give you, whereas students who have only given me, say, 50 words of a draft, it means obviously they're not going to get as much feedback, but I won't actually be checking the word count. I hope that helps, but I'll definitely explain sort of what stages your draft should be at in a minute as well.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Definitely keep the questions coming as we go through if you have any as well. I know this is quite a bit of information to listen to. So in terms of, I will again bring up the example in a moment where I'll sort of show you how the start looks for your report. But then you will be having an introduction. So an introduction stating what you're going to cover in your report and which organizational environment or field you are basing your research on. So it is always good to actually do the introduction at the end. I know it sounds a little bit odd, but at this stage, you probably don't know what disruptive technologies you're going to include. So often you want to come back and do the introduction at the end once you know what information you've actually put into your report. The introduction does not have to be long. And it does have to be written in third person. So we don't want to see any I's or my's or ours or those types of personal pronouns used in this report. So I don't want to see a student say, I want to be a mechanical engineer, so that is what this report is focusing on. Instead, it should say, this report is focused on mechanical engineering. So you just have to slightly change that sentence. That's definitely something that I would pick up in a draft as well. The introduction should be short, but you should definitely be telling me what are the 3 disruptive technologies that you're going to be covering, and what job or area of jobs are you talking about in this report. So questions come through, is the whole report strictly third person? Yes, yep, strictly third person. As not all assessments in university will be, but most assessments are strictly third person. Good question. So that's your introduction. Then you're going to be choosing your 3 different disruptive technologies. So really important with these, you do have to clearly define what the technology is. So don't assume that I know what it is. Even if you think, well, Bree definitely knows what a blockchain is, for example, pretend that I don't. You have to tell me what is it, actually define what it is, and you should be referencing that. You then need to describe advantages and disadvantages of your chosen disruptive technologies. So again, this will be based on referencing, but you can put your own ideas in here as well. So again, although you're going to be putting your own ideas in this, you're not going to be saying, I think that a disadvantage is. You'll still be saying that a disadvantage is. So still not using personal pronouns. What I don't want to see, and where students wouldn't score as highly, is if you say there are no disadvantages to a disruptive technology, or there's no advantages to one. There is always going to be some advantages and some disadvantages. Identify your ideal future career role. So describe how these technologies could benefit and challenge the future career that you're focused on. So again, making sure that you're using third person. So instead of saying, I want to be a mechanical engineer and blockchain is going to be relevant because, say, blockchain will be relevant to mechanical engineering because. So you're still saying the same thing, you're just wording it in a slightly different way. Explain at least 3 potential ethical issues that are going to arise from the disruptive technology. Also, don't worry if some of these points you're really unsure of at the moment. If you are really unsure of what I'm even talking about when I'm saying ethical issues, we still have a lot of content to get through in this term as well. So when you're doing drafts as well, you don't have to do the draft in order of the report. So for example, you don't have to do the ethical issues for the draft next week. You could do that later after we've spoken about ethicals a bit more. So explain at least 3 potential security issues arising from each of the technologies. And using scholarly sources, apply your critical thinking skills to review each of the disruptive technologies and provide a conclusion with your recommendations. So there's an example here about, it says, driverless cars may optimize our commute to work in the future, help stuck in traffic congestions and lower our carbon footprint. However, the technology underpinning these autonomous vehicles may also enable the collection of detailed travel log data with our personal social activities, which may be reused in other contexts. So just want to have a summary of what are the good things and what are the bad things. Then you can end on potentially that maybe there's more good than bad, for example. You can see a question has come in the chat that the report seems the same as practical checkpoint 3. It is definitely similar. So in practical checkpoint 3, you're doing a table around different disruptive technologies. So you can definitely take that information from that practical checkpoint and put it into the report as well. But you can also choose different ones that are more related to your area. And would the final report have more than 10 or so paragraphs looking at all these points we must include? Yeah, there is going to be quite a number of paragraphs. I will show you the example of the report in a moment. And I think that gives you a little bit of a better idea about how long the report might be and how many paragraphs you need. So you will be doing so all of these points, you'll be doing these 3 times for the 3 different disruptive technologies. And again, I'll bring up the example in a minute, but you talk about one disruptive technology and then you move on to the next one. So you don't sort of talk about the advantages and disadvantages of the 3 of them. We'll do it as 3 separate disruptive technologies. So as I said, this is a PDF, so I wasn't able to edit it, but it's due week 11. That's the date from last year, but due week 11. So we're currently in week 5. We have a lot of time to get this through. So I will bring up the example. So like I said, the example shows what it's going to look like. So you're going to have your cover page. You're then going to have a table of context and a table of figures as well. And then you'll see you have a short introduction. So like I said when I went through this last time, this doesn't make sense. This report does not make sense. It's not information that you can copy and paste and use on your own. That was a deliberate choice. So don't worry about what it says, worry about how it's structured. So you have a little introduction, and then then you're going to talk about your first disruptive technology, all of those aspects, all of those dot points I just went through, then your second disruptive technology, all of those points, and then your third disruptive technology, all of those points, and then you have a brief conclusion at the end talking about the 3 disruptive technologies and some of the advantages and disadvantages of those. And then you have your reference list. So this example is about 7 pages long. I would say that probably between 6 and 9 pages would be roughly where you would be expecting to be. Some students might have slightly longer depending on how many references they have or depending on how many figures or images that they use, for example. But if you have less than 6, I would say you probably don't have enough information. And if you have more than 8 or 9, then you probably have too much information. So that's a guide. And again, as we are working through the drafts and I'm giving you feedback on those, hopefully that will make more sense as well. So this is, just an example of how it's going to look. Like I said, it's not an example of what the contents is going to be. So if we have a look, I'm also going to bring up the marking guide. It's important to know where you're going to be getting marks for this assessment. So you will see that, so this assessment is out of 100 marks. So firstly, we have 5 marks for formatting. So in terms of the title page, the table of contents and the headings, all graphics must have captions, and that it is, submitted according to the instructions and that you're submitting it as a Word document and all of those things. So you get 5 marks for that. You get most of your marks from the information, which makes sense. That's the really hard work that's going to take a lot of time. So we want to reward you with lots of marks for those. So you'll be getting 70 marks for the introduction, the 3 technologies, and the conclusion. So some really important points to remember is firstly that the research is conducted using reliable sources. Sources should be from 2017 to 2022. You might not find very many 2022 resources yet. The reason that we want just very new referencing is we're talking about disruptive technologies. These are new technologies. We don't want you to be talking about technology from 15 years ago because that won't be disruptive anymore. Students demonstrate an ability to combine multiple sources with their own view to present an argument. So remembering how I said around particularly advantages and disadvantages, you can have some of your own ideas in there, but we also want to see some referencing as well. So arguments supported by evidence. Students show a depth of knowledge in their chosen disruptive technologies. So firstly, they do have to be disruptive technologies. They do have to be relevant to the area of work that you're focusing on. And I want to see them as being 3 distinctly different technologies. So for example, if a student was talking about, let's say they were talking about, one of the disruptive technologies was an Apple Watch and then one of them was a Garmin watch. They're basically the same thing. They're wearable watches, wearable technology. So I want to see 3 distinctly different technologies discussed. The definition in particular does have to be from a reliable source. You must have a reference to define your technology. I know that lots of you can probably explain the technology to me. You know, if I just asked you what it is, you could probably explain it to me, but you do have to find a reference for it. It's one of the more frustrating aspects of university and academia. I spend so much time looking for referencing of things that I know, but I just need to have a reference to support it. So it's important that you do get into that habit for future assessments as well. You must clearly articulate the advantages and disadvantages, the benefits and challenges, ethical issues and security issues. And so importantly, this does have to be written in a way that's clear and easy to understand. Critical reviews and recommendations are provided for each of the technologies. Information is presented at appropriate levels. So in terms of those headings, so again, go back and have a look at the example, and there's different levels of headings that you have to include. And really importantly, that it is written in your own words. Then have 5 marks for correct English expression, grammar, spelling, and punctuation. So about really the spelling and the grammar. And then 20 marks for the correct use of Harvard referencing. So like I said, I'm going to go over that a bit more tonight as well. Then if you hand up all 3 drafts, there'll be no marks deducted because you did all 3 drafts. If you hand up only 2 drafts, there'll be -5 marks. If you hand up 1, there's -10. And if you hand up no drafts, there's -15 marks, which out of 100 possible marks is quite a few. And it probably means that you would go down an entire grade. So important that you make sure you get drafts in, not only because you will lose marks, I'll deduct marks if you don't, but because I think that everybody who puts in drafts are going to score higher because they're going to get feedback from me along the way as well. So it's a win-win situation rather than a lose-lose situation if you don't submit the drafts. So on the draft, you'll see that there are these PDFs about the drafts as well. So in particular, with draft 1, this is the draft that is due at the end of next week on week 6. So I'm briefly going to quickly recap about what is disruptive technology, because that is what our focus of today is going to be. Actually, before I do that, I think it's going to be more use to show you what the first draft should be. Then I'll talk about the disruptive technologies. So if you click on draft 1, you'll see that there's some information about what it should be. So this is due Sunday, week 6, by the way. So you should start having some subheadings in your document. And importantly, you should have decided on your 3 disruptive technologies and probably starting to include at least a definition of those technologies. That is what I'm really expecting from draft 1. Some of you, and also in draft 1, sorry, I'm also definitely expecting you to tell me somewhere what Korea path or career area you're focusing on. That's really important so that then I can see, yep, those disruptive technologies match your career. If I'm just guessing what career you are talking about, then I'm not going to be able to give you that useful feedback. Now, these are all those subheadings that I went through before. You do not have to have these all completed for the first draft at all. Some of you might start having some dot points and things like that under the different headings. Awesome. The more you have, the more, I can comment on. But really importantly for this first draft, and I will remind you about this next week as well, I want to see the 3 disruptive technologies that you have selected, a definition of those technologies, and definitely telling me what career you are focusing on, what career area you're focusing on. That is really important. Now, I will go back to where I just was. Is there any questions at this stage? If you have any questions, definitely put them in the chat while I'm getting this organized. Awesome. So, like I said, I've just got a couple of slides about what disruptive technologies are, and then we will get into our first sort of activity for today. So a disruption describes a process whereby a smaller company with fewer resources is able to successfully challenge established incumbent businesses. Now, that is the definition of disruptive. So this isn't yet the definition of disruptive technology, but just thinking about, okay, well, what does the word disruption actually mean? Now, I have a video, as always, bear with me to get it going. It always takes a while. I'll share the sound and hopefully it works. I should be sharing with you.
Company beat an industry giant on its own turf through what Harvard Business School professor Clayton Christensen calls disruptive innovation. It works like this. Big players focus on sustaining innovation, upgrading existing products and services to attract higher paying customers. But soon, they start to ignore all the regular customers who just want simple, low-cost alternatives. That's where the entrepreneurial company jumps in with that basic offering. The big guys stay focused on more profitable customers and begin to overserve, adding bells and whistles no one wants to pay for. Meanwhile, the disruptor improves its product to appeal to more people. By the time the incumbent notices, the disruptor has already started to take over the market. The classic example is the steel mini mills, which first produced low-quality rebar, then moved to sheet steel, stealing business from the large mills that had been dominant. More recent disruptors include car makers like Toyota and Hyundai, which launched with economy models, then added luxury features and brands. The only way for industry giants to fight back is by launching their own disruptive innovations. To succeed, they must treat the project as a separate unit with a different business model and growth expectations. Ask, what job do customers need to get done? Segment customers by job, not by product, market size, or demographics. And develop basic, low-cost ways to get the job done. That's how Procter & Gamble came up with Crest White Strips, a cheap, do-it-yourself alternative to an expensive dental service. Disruptive innovation creates new markets and reshapes existing ones. To achieve growth in a fast-changing world, you want to be a disruptor. Don't be disrupted.
Okay, let me get back to, here we go. So there is an extended reading that you can, I'm not going to go through it now, but if you want to read more about disruptive innovation and disruptive, sort of what disruptive means in the context particularly of businesses and things like that, you can definitely have a look at that. In terms, however, of a disruptive technology, so a disruptive technology makes obsolete an earlier process, method, or product and creates value for stakeholders, individuals, and organizations. And like I said before, it changes the way that we do things. Also, we've spoken a lot in our lectures already about how when new technology comes out, it can sometimes mean that instead of needing the 5 products that we used to need to do 5 different things, we now have one product that does all 5 of them. So always come back to the smartphone as being a really key example there. So I have another video, again, bear with me. Oh, no, sorry, not a video this time. Let me make sure that's sharing with you. Yeah. So you might want to have a look at this website in more detail. This is all available to you under those resources for the report. So it's a good definition of what disruptive technology is, and sort of some key takeaways. And there's also some examples of disruptive technology as well. So it could be a really good place to start your research. And if there is a definition or something here that you want to include, this would be the type of website that is okay to include as a reference as well. So disruptive technologies, these are just 8 examples. There is so many more out there that you can include in your report, but these are some that you might want to include as well. A lot of them are ones that we have already spoken about in some of the lectures. So in particular, we've talked about artificial intelligence, we've talked about augmented reality and virtual reality, talked about those quite a bit. We've also definitely spoken about the Internet of Things, and in particular, how that is has been really disruptive in, I guess, also really important in things like smart houses and smart appliances. Robotics is obviously a very big disruptive technology, and one that is continuing to be disruptive. Robotics is probably relevant to lots of different areas that you might want to go into. Blockchain, and then sort of the knock-on effect that that is having in terms of cryptocurrency, in terms of businesses, in terms of investments. 3D printing, having huge implementations in medical areas where, you know, there's parts of the body are being printed in 3D for different surgeries. So if you're thinking of health, that could definitely be one that you want to discuss. And drones are huge. You know, we see a lot now that maybe soon our Domino's pizza will be arriving by drones instead of by car. So drones will have a really big knock-on effect in a lot of the research I do. In particular, I look at sharks in the media and things like that, but we know that drones are being used as shark spotting technologies as well. So just a whole heap of examples of how these different types of technologies are being used. So this is another reference that you can have a look at. So this is, it loads up, being nice and slow. So this is 10 emerging technologies of 2019. So these are already a couple of years old, but are still definitely within that realm that you could include. So there's a whole sort of list of different problems and the technologies that are being used to assist with those problems. Again, I'm not going to go through this in detail now, but is another website that you might want to have a look at, and potentially some of these technologies are relevant to your area. And this is, again, definitely a website that you can reference as well. So we're not going to do these activities because I have a slightly different activity that's more related to the assessment that I want to do. So go back to, firstly, before I get into the activity, are there any more questions about the assessment at this point that I can answer for anybody?
Yes, hold on. I have a question.
Yeah, of course.
When's the next thing we have to submit for the reports? Will first draft or?
Yeah, so the first draft is due on Sunday, week 6. So not this coming Sunday, next Sunday.
Okay, yeah, I was all right, great. I just worried for a second that I'd missed something and it was due this week.
No, not at all. Yeah, so I'm just going through it this week because we have some other assessments due next week as well. So I wanted to sort of get a head start on the report this week to give you plenty of time.
Yeah, awesome, thank you.
No problem. Okay, so what I want to do is, like I said, I want to give you time in this class as well to actually get started and get thinking about this assessment. So I want us to take 15 minutes where I want you to start it as part of this as well, which I don't have this on the slide, but firstly, definitely think about what career area are you wanting to go into? Thinking about, are you going to make that a specific career? Are you going to say, like I was saying, I want to be a mechanical engineer, or I want to be a human resource employee, or I want to be a physiotherapist? Or are you going to be a bit more broad and say, I want to work in healthcare, or I want to work in IT, or I want to work in engineering? So that's the first step, thinking about what you're going to focus on in terms of your career choice. Oh, sorry, I can see there's a couple of questions in the chat as well. So firstly, the question is that 3 ethical issues for each point, or 3 all up, 1 for each point? So it's 3 for each technology. So it's 9 issues all up. That doesn't mean that some of the, like, there might be similar ethical issues for multiple of the technologies though. So you might be able to talk about a similar ethical issue for 2 of them, for example, but you do have to talk about 3 ethical issues for each of the technologies. Sorry that I missed that. That didn't come through as a notification for me, that question. And then the other question is, does it have to be our dream field? The idea is that it is the field that you want to go into. In reality, it doesn't have to be your absolute dream field. You can just say that it's the field that you want to go into. I'm not going to come and knock on your door in 10 years and make sure that you're doing the dream job that you put down, but it should be something that you're interested in. Can we use the same technology as checkpoint 3? Yeah, definitely. So good point. People picked up, if you have done checkpoint 3, that part of that was to use the disruptive technology. So definitely can use those. If you have done that, another question has come that they've already started this and they've done that, then I want you to spend these 15 minutes to sort of go to the next step. So for example, think about, how are these technologies related to the area that you want to work in, and maybe start looking at some definitions for that as well. So a question has also come, can you choose any technologies? So they have to be disruptive technologies. They have to be new technologies that are changing the way that we do things. To be fair, that is a lot of technology. Most technology is quite disruptive, but importantly, it has to be new technology. It doesn't have to be absolutely brand new, but it has to be recent in the past few years. So questions come through about a smartphone. A smartphone isn't recent. So if you want to talk about a new function that a new smartphone does that's relevant to your area, you could talk about that. But a smartphone in itself is not disruptive anymore. It definitely was disruptive, but it's not disruptive in the past few years. Good question. So like I said, we'll come back at 7:30. So I'll be here. So if you have questions, keep them coming in the chat, but I'll just put myself on mute. 15 minutes, you might not completely get 3 done in 15 minutes. That's totally fine. at least definitely get one, because then we're going to split off into groups and have a bit of a chat about your disruptive technologies amongst each other as well, which might be really useful for those students who are a bit unsure about other ones and things like that. So we'll come back in just less than 15 minutes at 7:30. So like I said, I will be here, but I'll be on mute. So if you have any questions, keep them coming in the chat and I can respond.
Hey, Bray. Tomorrow we have class at Union.
Yes.
Oh, the actual place.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
So I'll
cool.
be there
Just
tomorrow.
asking.
Yeah. So you don't have to, but I'll be there
Cool.
tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, it'd be nice to see your face for the first time.
I know. Week 5 as well. It's crazy how quickly it's gone. Okay, we've had almost 15 minutes. So like I said, I know that you probably haven't found all three, but I hope you've at least started to think about what disruptive technologies might be relevant to your areas. Like I said, we're going to go on a break in a second, and then we are going to go out into breakout rooms to give yourself an opportunity to have a chat with each other about disruptive technologies, and maybe you'll get a new idea. And then we'll come back and I can keep answering questions that people have as well. So like I said, we're halfway through the class now. So we'll have a 10-minute break to stretch your legs, grab a drink, whatever you need to do. So we'll come back at 7:40 and then we'll go off into our breakout rooms. So enjoy a quick break. Okay, everyone, we will get started again. So like I said before the break, so hopefully you've had a little bit of time now to think about at least one or two of the, sorry, I have hiccups at the moment, at least one or two of the technologies that you want to discuss in your report. So what I'm going to do is put you into a breakout room for about 15 minutes. And I want you to share with each other the disruptive technologies you're thinking about, the career choice you're thinking about, and give each other some feedback on, do you think it's a disruptive technology? Do you think it's relevant? How could it be related? Just having a nice discussion. And like I said, it might help if you're struggling a little bit with what types of technologies you want to include. Hearing what other people include might help you. Just remember as well, it's totally fine for you to talk about the same disruptive technology as another person, as long as you're doing your own work and you're applying it to your own field or your own future career, and you're doing your own research, that's totally fine. So don't be too concerned about sharing your ideas with others, because it is okay to overlap as well. So like I said, about 15 minutes. So we'll come back at hopefully these hiccups go away before I have to talk again. We'll come back just at about 8 o'clock, and then we will get into some referencing information. I'll still be here if you have questions as well, but I'll put you into the breakout rooms now. Welcome to all those coming back. We'll wait about a minute before the break rooms close. Almost all back. About 20 seconds before they close and everyone will have to come back.
Hello.
Hi.
That was so weird. I'm sorry.
It's fine. Everyone should be back in a second. Awesome. Hopefully that's everyone back. I hope you enjoyed having a little bit of a chat around disruptive technologies and what disruptive technologies you are thinking about doing in your assessment. Just before I get into the really fun stuff about referencing, hoping that everyone could put in the chat on the screen. I haven't said for you, like it would be useful not only to say the disruptive technology you're thinking of including in your assessment, but also what sort of the general area of your future career might be. So if you don't want to do it to everyone, you can definitely just do it to me in the chat. Otherwise, put it in there. Just really great for me to have a bit of an idea about the directions that people are going, and I can go through and respond if I think that any of them potentially aren't disruptive technologies as well. So everyone can start putting in one of their disruptive technologies that they'll be talking about in their assessment in the chat. Awesome. Fantastic. Awesome so far, definitely. Will be really interesting and really different in terms of how they'll be used. Awesome. Yeah, facial recognition definitely will have lots of uses. Awesome idea around 3D printing in early childhood education. Yes, awesome. Virtual reality. Yep. 3D printing in mechanical engineering, 100% super relevant. Yeah, blockchain technologies in quantum computers. Yep. Artificial intelligence. Yes, I think that no matter what area you are thinking of going in, artificial intelligence is probably going to be relevant. Yeah, blockchain again, definitely. Collaborative commerce, awesome. VR, yeah. Yes, awesome about how to use virtual reality and augmented reality with communication, AI, 3D printing, health science, definitely, like I was saying before, super relevant. Awesome. All the ideas coming through are fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. Feel free, there's a few more to come through as well, but awesome. It's great to see that everybody is on the right track, which is absolutely fantastic. So, like I said, getting into the super fun aspect of referencing. So for this course, we use UniSA Harvard referencing. So obviously, although sort of some of the practical checkpoints do have a little bit of referencing in them, a lot of the assessments that we do don't have a huge focus on referencing, but this final report definitely does. So it's really important that you are referencing information and that you are using UniSA Harvard. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second and bring up the course. Bear with me 1 second. It always wants me to log back in all the time. Okay. Awesome. I will share because it's now working. So on the course page, under the e-resources, which is also where you find access to the textbooks and things like that, we have some information about how to reference using UniSA Harvard referencing. really important, like I said, this is the referencing style that you'll be using for this course and for the vast majority of courses at SAIBT and at UniSA as well. So there's sort of two key resources here. It's the same information in both of them. It's just different ways of accessing that information. So firstly, we have the UniSA's Harvard style PDF. So this is all of the information about the Harvard referencing. So it is quite a long document, and it goes from explaining, you know, what is referencing, why do we reference, information about paraphrasing and quotes, but then really importantly, it talks about how do we reference. So firstly, there are two components to referencing that you'll have to do for this assessment. So you have to do in-text referencing. So this will be within your writing, within your paragraph, in your report. And then you have to have your reference list at the end. Now, it's really important with Harvard, not all referencing styles are the same with this, but with Harvard in particular, your in-text references have to match your reference list. So what that means is any references that you have included in the in-text referencing, you have to include in the reference list, and vice versa. Any references that you have in your reference list do need to be in the in-text referencing as well. So this is instead of sometimes some things that you might read might use footnote referencing, where there's references at the end of each of the pages, or at the bottom of each of the pages, I should say. We don't do footnotes. So for us, it's just in-text referencing within your writing itself, the reference list right at the end. So a few important points. In-text referencing, there are two ways that we can in-text reference. So the first way we call it is information prominent referencing. This means that the information comes first. So for example, in this sentence here, it says, universities play an active role in finding solutions for climate change. And then it has the reference at the end in brackets. This is what we call information prominent referencing. So the information comes first, and then we just put the reference at the end in brackets. We also have author prominence referencing, so this is the same information and the same reference. However, in this case, it's saying, Philo argues that universities can play an active role in finding solutions for climate change. So it's author prominent because we put the author first. There's no right or wrong with this. Both of them are completely acceptable. What I would say is that it often flows really nicely within an assessment if you use a combination of both. However, like I just said, there is no right or wrong. But it is important that you do at least one of these, because you do have to be including in-text referencing. So when it comes to in-text referencing, we need the author's family name. So if it's an author, particularly if it's an article or something like that, you need the author's family name or author's family name if it is more than one. I'll get to that in a second. The year that it was published, and then in some instances you need a page number, but not all of them. So you have to include a page number if you are quoting part of a source word for word, so you're using those quotes that I was talking about before, or if you summarize or paraphrase ideas from specific pages. So in particular with books, usually you're going to have to include a page number, because normally you're taking information from one page or maybe a couple of pages in the book. So in terms then of this was the in-text referencing. So that's all the information that you have to include in the in-text references. And then you have to have your reference list. So like I was saying, anything that you reference in text has to be referenced in the reference list as well. A few really important points about the reference list. They do have to be listed in alphabetical order. So your references have to be listed in alphabetical order, and all of your references are in the same list. So you do not need a separate list for journal articles versus websites. All of them are in the same list. However, so you just have to put them all in alphabetical order by the first author's last name. Or if it's an organization that you're referencing, particularly with websites, then it's the organization's name. So in this case, you can see that it is in alphabetical order. This is sort of just some general information, but then we get into some more specific information about what you actually have to include. I'm going to skip through this, but definitely recommend that you can, I'm going to skip through this one, but definitely recommend that you can have a look if you want to know a little bit more about referencing. So this is where you'll start to see that there is different ways that we reference depending on the type of reference that it is. So for this assessment, you are probably going to be using journal articles, which is this one here. Potentially books, because you might find a textbook or something like that that you want to use. And then also likely using, where is the, I'm blind at the moment. I can't see where a website is. Must be later down. These are all websites not there yet. So from this one, it's probably likely the journal article or the books, but you may also use the websites as well. So there are some more information about frequently asked questions. So again, I'm not going to go through this word for word because that would be exceptionally boring for you. However, I just want you to start to sort of know about some of the key issues with referencing. So one important one is that if there are more than 3 authors in in-text referencing, then you can use et al, which is Latin for and others. So you do not, so if there is more than 3 authors, you just need to have the first author's last name and then you use et al rather than listing all of the author's names. That's a really important one. And then trying to pick up, so like I said, there's lots of sort of little nitty gritty things to go through. But what's particularly useful in this PDF that I wanted to show you is that there are these examples for how to reference. So like I said, you definitely might use a book reference. So you need to look at this and look at all of this information about how to reference books. And then there's some information about what if the book has more than one author. So you can go through that. There's lots of different types. You may use an edited book, but I would say probably not for this assessment. But if you do use an edited book, in particular, some textbooks are edited, then you'll need to use the edited book options. Journal article, you should definitely be including some journal articles. So this is another really important one to look at. Make sure you pay attention to what needs to be in italics, what needs to have capital letters, all of those types of things. Again, there's some different types of articles, different types of referencing. Government publication could be another one that you use in this assessment. So particularly sometimes there's government reports about technology being used. So there is examples for that. Don't think we're going to be using legal publications or patents or things of that description. But the other main one will be online, your web pages. So that's the other really important one to look at as well. Remembering that we do want them to be reputable web pages. So meaning that they should be government organizations or reputable technology organizations, things like that. We don't want you to use Wikipedia. So this PDF is an extremely important resource for you so that you can ensure that you are referencing correctly. It's really important that referencing can be quite daunting at the start. I completely understand there's so many sort of little nitty gritty aspects of referencing that can be quite frustrating at the start. I will definitely help, like when I'm looking at drafts and things like that, or when I'm marking, I'll pick up if there's any errors and I'll sort of help you work out where those are, because really importantly, moving forward into your other courses, you're always going to have to reference. So it's really important that we try to get you and your referencing skills up as high as possible in this course before you go on into your other courses as well. The other part though that I wanted to also draw your attention to is that, so that's the PDF that I just went through. There's also an online version of the Harvard Guide. So you can have a look through the online version as well. So if you click on this, it's the same information as what is in the PDF. It just looks a little bit differently, and you can click through and have a look at that. So really it's up to sort of your personal preference over whether you would rather use the PDF or the website, or maybe you want to use both, but really important that you do use these resources for your report. Just going to go back to the slide. So I know I've given you a lot of information about the report tonight and about referencing as well. Are there any questions that you have at the moment that I can answer?
No.
No? Yeah, just give me on the chat. It doesn't look like anything's coming through in the chat either. Oh. Yes, I know. Someone has mentioned that it's too much information, you need to think about it. I totally get that, and I do apologize for the bit of information overload. Obviously, we have our practical tomorrow, so if after we finish tonight you think, oh, I wish I asked Free that question, you have tomorrow and you have next week and all of that. So totally fine if you don't have questions now. So I guess just to recap some of the really important things to remember for this week. So week 5, tomorrow in our practical class, we're really going to be focusing on the practical checkpoint, which is due on Friday night. So that is what the class is going to be dedicated to. So I'll, like in previous weeks, I'll sort of do a brief overview of what the practical checkpoint is, and then it will be working on that at your own pace. Students who have already started working on that practical checkpoint or who finished that early, I definitely recommend that they spend the time in class to keep working on the report and working on the draft report that is due next Sunday. So not this Sunday, but next Sunday. Important, the reason that we really went through the report today and I gave you some, time to get started on the report is that next week in the practical, we have a practical checkpoint and a multiple choice quiz due. So there probably won't be too much time in next week's practical to work on the report. So I didn't want to sort of give you all of this information next week whilst also doing those 2 other assessments. Like I said, with the draft, it is a draft. It does not have to be polished. It can be dot points. Everyone's drafts will probably be at slightly different stages. For draft 1, what I really want to see is you telling me what is your area of future career that you are focusing on, and what are your 3 disruptive technologies. And if you can have a definition of those technologies, that will be fantastic. Obviously, if you do more than that, awesome. But that is really the crux of what I want to see in that first assessment. Apart from that, if there are, obviously, if you have any questions, keep the questions coming. But apart from that, give you a 10-minute early minute. But what I recommend is definitely decompressing some of this information and just thinking about your disruptive technologies and what ones you want to do, and maybe jotting down some notes for that as well. But otherwise, I will see you in class tomorrow. Like I said, it will be hybrid tomorrow, so I'll be on campus. Otherwise, it'll be on Zoom as well, and we'll be focusing on practical checkpoint 3. But thank you all for joining, and I hope you have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. See you.
See you.
See you.
Bye.
Good day.
Bye.
See you later. Bye. See you later. No worries, Corey.